Hey guys, what's up? What's up, Theory and Theology? I woke up too early, around 3 a.m. And Saturday night I stayed up late till I was going to sleep around 11 something. I probably didn't sleep till midnight probably, but I'm up. I'm not up for the day, but I've been up. It's almost 5 a.m. and I was like, yeah, let me just record a little blurb. So just kind of wanted to talk some about Bibles and denominations and things. Not too much depth to it, just kind of a little rambling here because I'm up. So I'm like, let me just do something a little bit. So there's this YouTube channel that I kind of like. At the moment, he's interviewing this lady who wrote this book called Our Rabbi Jesus, JESUS, .com is her website. And it's a live interview going on right now. I'm not listening to the whole thing, but the channel is called Disciple Dojo as one word. And I guess what kind of caught my attention is he's reviewing all these Bibles. He has a lot of various content, mostly from a Christian perspective. He's reviewing a lot of Bibles, and there's this one now, I don't know if I would call this a Bible. It's more like Bible story influenced. It's called Manga Messiah, and there's another one called Manga Mutiny, and there's another one called The Manga Bible. And I didn't watch the entire videos, mostly because, those seem like books that I might actually decide to purchase for my own personal bookshelf. I did watch a little more before that from him. I think the first video I came across was his review of an Orthodox study Bible. So it's called A Protestant Looks at the Orthodox Study Bible. That's what the thumbnail says. And it has a picture of that Bible with the dust jacket on it. And he takes off the dust jacket and starts describing kind of the translations used for the Old and New Testament and the study notes that are in there. I guess apparently it's for, if you can read at a high school graduate level, it's about the notes are at about that level of complexity. He was talking about how the pages are kind of thin, and where they decided to which versions of the Bible they were using. I believe he said for the New Testament it's New King James Version. So that's one channel I was just kind of bopping around on since I'm up, and I was like, I just want to click around on some stuff. I'll do that. I don't know, sometimes I'm not really watching things. I'm just kind of kind of watching, I'm just watching things to just unwind and kind of get back to sleep, or just have something on my mind that's kind of interesting, but not really something that I need to know, maybe. There's this other guy, Matt Whitman, Mattwhitman. he basically goes around in some of his videos and he interviews a lot of different, basically, I'd say religious leaders. I'd say that's the category. You know, he goes to different types of churches, different denominations of churches. As far as I've seen, it's been Christian churches. So like Lutherans, Episcopal, Baptist, Southern Baptist. I think there was a Southern Baptist one. I scrolled around a while, but I didn't really watch all of them. I watched a lot of one with a Greek Orthodox church. One with a Catholic church. Now he goes into the churches and he talks to the person or one of the people in charge of the church or cathedral in that point, in that one Catholic video. And Antiochian Orthodox. Now that's where it started, was the Antiochian Orthodox video. I think there were multiple videos with that same, I don't know if they're called priests or bishops or what the label is for the person. But it's just interesting because I wasn't from any churches that are anything like that. Like the churches, you know, the Adventist churches tend to be more modern-ish. Let me give you an example. We had church when I was a kid. It was located closer to LAX, and the church was like a small church building, and it had quite a bit of property to it, though. It had like 3 levels of property to it. Like it was built kind of on like a hill, so it had like this one level of parking that was behind the actual church building. It's really hard to explain. And it had, I think, classrooms along that backside of the church building. You could drive into that parking lot from the street on the left side of the church if you're facing the church, or you could just park curbside. Lining the back right side of the church, there were classrooms, I think, on the first level, the second level. Then the lower level also had parking. I don't think the middle level had parking, but the lower level also had parking where you could come in through this alley on the right side of the church. And it was, I think there was just a kitchen down there that was used as like a fellowship hall. And at some point they had a preschool that was there during the weekdays. So there was like play equipment on the different levels, and the classrooms that we used as like the Sabbath school lesson rooms were used as like classrooms for the children. And yeah, so like the sanctuary of the church had like a baptismal pool kind of built into it. I remember getting baptized at that church. I think they tore the church down and built apartments. I think the property got sold, and I think it's now apartments. I haven't been there in like years, but I think it's now apartment buildings. And yeah, so it would have looked like a typical modern church without the traditional. It's not very traditional at all. And especially all the kind of like, okay, sharing with the preschool and all that kind of thing. Like the preschool was part of like the Adventist church. Like they had this like this line of preschools that, I think it was called Discovery Land, and they had a couple of them around, like maybe 2 or 3 of them. It was like a brand that developed in my lifetime. I don't think it existed like all the time. I think somebody made that preschool and they put up like maybe 2 of them, maybe 3 of them in LA County. So that's what that church looked like. We moved from that church to the Adventist school in the South Bay area. We used the gym as the school, and that gym on Fridays, because I went to the school, that gym on Fridays, they would roll out these like teal colored carpets and like a man-made kind of like stage that was carpeted with some steps, and we would put up chairs. So Friday or Thursday, I think we would do this. I think the upperclassmen, so because it was a junior academy, the upperclassmen were grades 9 and 10, and we basically would put out these chairs. They were like a teal colored kind of cloth back wooden kind of wide, a slightly wide chair that like had little connectors between them, and then the outside chairs didn't have that connection. So we would unstack those chairs that were behind some big green, like, one of those chain link fences with that like green plastic on it, or green tarp kind of thing on it, like attached to it. That was in the gym, and so that was used as like storage, and it had that green stuff on it, so you couldn't really see like through it, so it didn't look like ugly with all the stored stuff in there. It kind of looked like things were neatly put away. So we get like the dollies and like, roll out the chairs, and some people would get out the carpets, roll up the carpets. I think the janitor or some adult guys would put up the stages. It was like a 3-part stage that was made. Like they had people who worked in like carpentry and all kinds of like professional jobs. So I think somebody made that stage. It was professional, but it was like handmade. It wasn't like purchased, I don't think. I vaguely remember this. I don't know if I was there when they built it, but I do remember when all this was new. Because before that, we didn't have that setup of chairs and things. And it would have to get broken down because the school, would use the gym during the weekdays. So Thursday, because Friday there was no PE class or anything, Thursday at the end of the day or something, or as part of our PE, the last like 20 or 30 minutes or so, all of us, I don't know if it was only 9 and 10, maybe it was like grades like 8 through 10 or something like that. It was a lot of us. We would like unstack the chairs and like, set up what we would use Friday morning for chapel at school. We'd have our uniforms for school, and we'd, you wear our chapel uniforms for school. Or if you're in 9th and 10th grade, you could wear like chapel attire, but it like if you're female, you'd wear like a skirt. If you're male, you'd wear like a tie and a shirt, pants. It wasn't like too dressed up. You could still wear like sneakers and stuff. Like nobody really cared. It was just you'd have to wear like the basics. And then it's like back in the 90s. Most people would get stuff from like Kmart, JCPenney's. It wasn't like too like upscale like Calvin Klein or anything. Like nobody cared about that kind of stuff. But yeah, when you were in 9th and 10th grade, you didn't have to wear the actual uniform. You just had to wear a very specific dress code that kind of mimicked the uniform. So it was like button-down shirts, polo shirts with collars basically, or like knit shirts with no color, no like graphic tees or anything like that. And then you'd wear, like, back then, like, khakis were really popular, like those khakis with the cargo pants. So brands like Union Bay and Gap and stuff like that. Old Navy, people would wear that kind of stuff mostly. Miller's Outpost, all those kind of stores. PacSun. People would, Pacific Sunwear back then. People would shop at those kind of stores for their clothes. So it didn't have to be like, it wasn't like ultra dressed up, but that's what we would wear during the week when we got older. We weren't wearing like the actual uniforms. But yeah, Fridays we would set up church there. Well, Fridays we would keep the stuff there. Saturdays, the congregation that used to be at that church near LAX, we combined with, I think, another church in the South Bay area and did the worship services in that school. Now, Saturday night, or maybe early Sunday morning, depending what time of year, the school had a I guess I should say they had like a parent teacher meeting the first Thursday night of every month. And so those chairs were already set up because we had done it for PE. So Thursday night, the first Thursday night of the month, the parents would use those for that meeting. And I think you'd get like $25 off your tuition or some amount off your tuition if you signed in and came to that meeting. And then, so it was Thursdays, Fridays we had chapel, Saturdays we had church. I know at certain times of year, the sports league, we would play baseball during the baseball season, basketball during a certain part of the year, and soccer. So basketball, we would play indoors because it was a gym. So we had 2 full courts in that gym. So 4 basketball goals with the backboards that would kind of like extend out or collapse into the wall. So while we were having church, the basketball, goals were collapsed into the wall. And then if it was sports league, well, actually, whoever put the chairs away on that, I think either Saturday night, because some Saturday nights the adults would play volleyball in that gym. And then other times they would, I guess, I don't know who put the chairs away. I feel like I remember putting chairs away sometimes, but I feel like it would have been way less people than like 4 classes, 2 to 4 classes of students. It would have been like my family, maybe another family. And to me, that feels like it's maybe too much. I feel like maybe we didn't have a role of like putting those chairs away. I really can't remember that part, but I do remember putting them away sometimes, but I don't think we did it every week. We might have done it Sunday mornings. I really don't remember, because usually we were the first families there, because it was my dad, my friend's dad. They were kind of in charge of the sports league along with the pastor, kind of like mediating between the school and the sports league. It was kind of connected to the church for the most part. Like they would go to other Adventist churches and Adventist schools in the area and kind of recruit, tell them about the sports, but we weren't actually yeah, like, you didn't have to be, like, Adventist to play. They would pray before the games. I can't remember if they probably pray after as well. But, I remember, yeah, there was something where, the church got put back up, like, so once you came into school on Monday, those chairs and everything weren't there anymore. What was used for the church service wasn't there. So we had church there for quite a few years. And the sports league sometimes used the same gym. Like, it was in a gym, so it's like, it wasn't like any of these churches on these videos where they're like actual like pews and like a whole sanctuary with the whole building. Like, I think after that we started renting from this Baptist church, like within walking distance, like 2 to 3 blocks away. So we would go to the Baptist church on either Friday nights. We'd have different types of meetings and things, and then Saturday, it was also in the South Bay area, and it was pretty multicultural. I think it was the same group that was worshiping in that gymnasium. It was pretty much some other, I don't know who, like, it was various groups. Like, during that time, I remember there were a lot of like Polynesian churches and like smaller churches, like in the city of maybe Hawthorne, maybe a couple little surrounding areas where there were like smaller churches, and they would kind of combine, they would come in, they would combine. And so there were a lot of churches that, like, you could pop from church to church. There were, like, other churches in the area. There's a Japanese church that wasn't that far away. It was probably, like, 4 or 5 miles away. It's a really small church. It's still there. There was I don't know what other church. One in San Pedro. It was Spanish speaking. There was a Serbian Yugoslavian church, also a Serbian Croatian church. It was called Yugoslavian before that conflict. That was also in San Pedro. So they had quite a few like ethnic churches. I think there was a Tongan church. I don't know if they merged with another church or what, but like there were other churches that had actual church properties that were like tiny little churches. But a lot of times they had like a language. It was like a particular language, but you could still go to any of those churches. It's just you might not really understand the language that they're speaking in, or like the language of the music and stuff. But I don't know. I've been to a couple of those churches. Nobody really cared. Like they were nice. Like they knew you were a visitor, and like it was cool. Like and a lot of the kids, we knew each other from like sports leagues or from like the school. So like there was a lot of overlap, and people went to various churches, and some kids from the school didn't go to any church. Some kids weren't even the same religion or religious at all. But yeah, after the Baptist church, there's a church in Redondo Beach that's still there. It's near the pier, kind of off Prospect, and that church was a really conservative church. There's another pretty conservative church up in Rolling Hills. They have a really nice property up there. It's like overlooking like off like the side of one of the bluffs. Like you can see like the city, and like it's way up in the hills. You could see like the ocean from up there and everything, but it's pretty high up. They've probably got one of the nicest properties around, and it's a quite older congregation. I think they've got an organ and everything. This other church in Redondo, I know they used to have an organ. I don't know if they have it anymore. They may have taken it out. It's probably the property closest to the beach. It used to be an older congregation. There was some conflict. And another church kind of sprung out of it. that is kind of attached to the Japanese church. They kind of shared like a property, and it was a church that had more like, I'd say it was mostly like Latinos, some white, black, Tongan, Filipinos, and most of us, I went there for a while, and most of us, I was there from when it started. I was part of the group that would come in and plan and stuff. And yeah, it was held at the gym at a certain point at like 3 p.m. And then later on, it got that other church building that's next to the Japanese church. And so it, so a lot of these churches kind of had this like morning conservative service at like 9, and then around like 11:30 it would become like, a church with like drums and like kind of more upbeat music, and like they weren't singing from the hymnals, and they'd have like PowerPoint slides for like the music lyrics and stuff. So those churches were kind of more modern. The other churches were kind of more traditional, but still not anything too fancy. No Orthodox look to it at all. And like I mentioned, like there was a point we were renting a gym. There was a point we were renting from a Baptist church. And now that church is in Redondo Beach, like walking distance from the pier. A couple blocks in, but you could walk there. It wouldn't be hard to walk there at all. And so it's in a prime area, but it's, I don't know. But that's how I've seen it change. Like in my lifetime, this is the 4th building, and there was some conflict. Some people who were kind of more traditional left from that traditional church in Redondo, and I think now it's called South Bay, but it was called Redondo. And some of the more strict practicing people left and went to the morning service at the church that's in Gardena next to the Japanese church, or they just spread out and went to other more conservative churches. So that was kind of my experience with just like churches. So watching these videos of these people with these churches was really interesting. I've been to churches that have pews. I think that first church near LAX, I think it had pews. I was pretty young when I was going there. But we never had like icons of any kind. I don't remember if there was ever any stained glass. Maybe there was, or like a fake version of stained glass or something. I think there was like a little bit, but it wasn't like all stained glass or anything. But yeah, we didn't have like a lot of like those paintings inside or any kind of like altars. There was like the stand where those on the stage that the pastor would put their Bible on, like that little like lectern. But yeah, there was no like altar. There was like some of the churches had that baptismal pool in the back. It was usually behind wherever the stage was. And then as things got more modern, they would get these like screens that pull down. They kind of like collapse up or pull down so that they could project the lyrics to the praise music. And they'd usually have a band up there on the stage. There was a point I was a part of a couple of the bands, or we just do like special songs and stuff sometimes. Very rarely, but sometimes. Or the school, there was like a bell choir that would come. I think they were from the Japanese church. There was a school from San Gabriel Academy. They would come every year and their choir would sing. And it was interesting. Almost every year somebody would pass out during their choir performance. I almost forgot, at one point there was this church that they opened at that gym called The Rock. It was back when like grunge music was popular. They made it into one of the local Torrance City newspapers. I remember there was this band called The Hollow. They would play there. They were kind of like a similar music to like Nirvana. It's kind of like rock. Maybe kind of like Nirvana meets DC Talk kind of route. Like, I guess their songs were religious. I don't really know. Like, back then, I would go and, like, rollerblade around the parking lot, but I wasn't too into the service. But a lot of the other kids I grew up with, they went. And it was one of my youth pastors that started that church. And a lot of local kids would come, whether or not they were in the church or not. And it was teens, mostly teens, high schoolers. And they'd have, like, a mosh pit going on and stuff. Like, I mean, I think they'd have, like, a sermon. I remember this one guy who was, like, a surfer. He would preach. I don't think he was a pastor. It was mostly, like, testimonies. I think there'd be pastors, too. But it was, like, to appeal to, like, the younger generation. And they got so much backlash. That youth pastor got torn to shreds by some of the committees, and they had to shut it down. But it was probably like the least traditional type of church service I've ever experienced in my life. I didn't have a problem with it, but I knew that other people did have a problem with it. But it was just, the music was pretty rockin', and in the Adventist church, they're pretty strict about dancing, so they didn't like that in the newspaper it showed kids kind of like, I wouldn't say it was like a mosh pit. I'd say it was like, how people used to like stand in those groups, like a bunch of people. Like, it wasn't like they were all sitting in the chairs. They were standing as like a bunch of people just kind of jumping up and down. It was kind of like that. Like, people would kind of like jump up and down. And it wasn't like in the seats. Like, people would come up close to the band, close to the stage, and be like jumping up and down, kind of like you would at like a rock type of concert. So I wouldn't say it was mosh pit. Like, they weren't like hardcore dancing, like swinging fists and like flipping and kicking and stuff. It was not like that. They weren't doing like the circle pit. They weren't doing like the kind of pushing people around and stuff. There was nothing like that. But it was a type of a pit. And the music had drums, and it was like rock music. And, they dress kind of like, flannels, long hair. In the area, it's like a beach city, so like, there's a lot of skaters and surfers and just local kids there in bands and stuff, and like, it kind of just appealed to that like 90s teen generation. And yeah, I kind of almost forgot about that, but it was like an official church. I don't think they had like an official pastor. I don't think the guy who preached was ordained. I think it was more like people telling like their testimonies, and they'd like read from the Bible some. And it really appealed to people. Like, it really appealed to like younger people. There were probably some older people there too, who just kind of wanted to observe or just weren't like too closed-minded. probably just sat in the back and chilled with some of the other old people. Like there were some people that were that I would always see around, even if it was like, it wasn't like as chaperones either. Like there would be people that I would say were like quietly supportive, that were like in a lot of the youth and collegiate spaces, where you'd see some kind of like older people. Like it would be like old couples and stuff, and like elderly, that were pretty supportive. I remember some of them, like a lot of them are no longer living, but I remember there would be some of these guys, we'd be like practicing our like rock music band practices and stuff, and they'd be there like getting the church ready and stuff, and like, they never tell us like, oh, what are you playing or whatever. Like they were always nice and polite, and like they never ridiculed the music, or never like, you guys are playing that rock. Like they were never like that. So it was kind of cool. Like there were, when I think of it, I'm like, yeah, they tried to kind of have this, there was a range of like very non-traditional stuff, like the gym and that rock service and like some other stuff, and churches with no pews, or renting a Sunday church, or like all this kind of stuff that wasn't like traditional. And then there were people that would be there that were like, you would think they would, I don't know, maybe they liked the music, maybe they were there for the messages, I don't know. But a lot of it was kind of testimony style, preaching for some of these alternative type of services. But it's also, it's LA. I don't think they did this kind of stuff in other places. It's LA. Like, LA is very interesting for, like, the Adventist congregations, because there's a lot of variety. Like I mentioned, there's a lot of, like, language churches. There's a lot of, ethnic type churches, depending on the ethnicities. But you could go to any of them. It was just culturally, you probably wouldn't, like, as a black person, I probably wouldn't be going to, like, what was called, like, the Yugoslavian church. I wouldn't be going there, like, every week or something. But, like, I had friends that were there, and, like, the pastor's kid was a friend of mine, and they lived on the property. Like, like, I had friends, that went to a Spanish church, and if I'd sleep over at their house, maybe we'd go to church at their church, and then, hang out at their house Saturday night, and then wake up and go to sports league in the morning and play soccer. And like, there's a community feel. Like, it wasn't very separated out. Like, I would see some people every day from pretty much the time I was 5 years old, or maybe second grade and up. There were some people that I literally, other than summer vacations when people would take trips, I would literally see these same few kids. Like, when I was a kid, we'd see each other literally all weekdays. We were in the same cohort in class, at school. We'd play sports league together. We'd have sleepovers together. We'd go to the same church together. We'd see each other. We grew up together, like, literally. It's like a very small town feel, but in a city like LA. And so, but there were some offshoot kind of little churches that sprung out all over the place, but none of them looked like any of these other Orthodox types of churches. The pastors didn't wear like that collar. We had a pastor that still, I think, wears like Hawaiian, like Tommy Bahama type shirts. He just makes it seem like feel casual, so that if somebody walks in that's not like in a suit and tie, they don't feel like they can't come in. Because like the pastor's not even wearing like a suit, so it's like, I'm not judging it, I'm just saying like that was like something he does on purpose, because he wants people to come in and learn and worship. And people could wear suits. Like, I had friends that were when I was in my teens, their parents would make them dress up. My parents would make us dress up. At a certain point, you kind of, a lot of us got more casual, but yeah, a lot of my friends, when I see them, like if I see them after church or something, they're wearing suits, ties, shoes, like the whole the whole attire. Some people don't. They might just wear like cargo pants and like a polo shirt or something, and like some Vans or something like that. Like, it can be pretty casual. But yeah, there's none of that, none of the icons. There's no veneration of icons. We never had icons in the church. I remember there was a debate I think one Easter, they made this like really big, heavy wooden cross that I think most of the year they keep it on the stage of the church. And at some point they were debating, if they should put up a Christmas tree. I feel like some years we had a Christmas tree, and then people were debating about, putting a Christmas tree in a church because of like the history of it. Even though most people would probably practice Christmas and celebrate Christmas, Adventist churches don't tend to have that like Christmas service like on Christmas Day or whatever. And the same with Easter Sunday. They don't tend to have an Easter Sunday service. Whatever the Saturday is or the Friday is, or during the week before Easter, there's usually a service. And then the service that happens on time, maybe like a Vespers Friday night. But they don't have a sunrise service on Easter. They don't have anything on Easter usually. On Easter Sunday, they usually have the Saturday regular service, but it's like caters toward like the Easter holiday. And there's usually talk about Passover, but there's not a Passover Seder, but they talk about it. So I would say that's very different from a lot of Protestant churches, that there's no Sunday service, there's no Christmas service. They have like Christmas plays. I haven't been for a while, but they usually have like a Christmas play. Let me see. Yeah, there's not like a lot of like paintings, drawings. I think they had these like banners at one point that would say stuff like faith, or like, have like a picture of a dove, or like things like that. But they were like handmade. People like sewed these large banners. I think when we had church in the gym, I'm just now remembering, they would kind of hang like maybe 5 or 6 of those or something, so that it kind of looked a little less like a gym. They hung those out. They were nice. They were beautiful. Yeah, might have one had like maybe a picture of a cross or a picture of the dove, and I think they had specific ones for Easter or something. I don't remember, but they'd have flowers. There'd usually be like a bouquet of flowers, or like an arrangement of flowers on the stage every week. Even I think during Easter, near Easter, it would be like the colors, like those pastel type colors. So there would be little themes and stuff like that, but it was never like very traditional like Easter service or Christmas service or anything like that. There were no icons. There was no like veneration of icons. Obviously there was no cathedral. There's no altar. We did do communion, I think, every 13th Sabbath, because it was quarterly. So every 13th week technically was like the quarter of the year. So usually that's when the lesson plans that they would have for you to read during the week and stuff, if you followed your age ranges or cohorts quarterly, it would be based on your age ranges. So they had like cradle roll and primary and juniors and young adults and collegiate and different adult groups like singles ministries and different groups like that, I guess. Like and you'd have a quarterly. They usually had like a mission. Our church didn't do that much, but usually I think every quarter they had like a mission conversation, or like they would talk about it during the offering call. They'd say there's the mission that they're talking about for that week, or whatever. But I think there'd be like a mission presentation every quarter or something. I vaguely remember this because I don't think they did it every quarter. I think just the ones that were important to them. There'd be like a world mission that like all the churches were kind of like supporting, or there'd be like smaller missions, like, you know, building a well somewhere in someplace in Africa, or building like an Adventist school or an Adventist church or something. So even when you were paying tithe or offerings, you have boxes that you could check where it would say what portion of the money would go to like certain things. So you could like put money towards different missions, or it would be only your tithe, which was supposed to be 10%, or you could put offerings on top of the tithes, or just only offering. You could put it in an envelope, and I think they give you tax information back, or you could just put it in the collection plate. I think they had like a collection bag at one point. It was like a bag with like these handles on it, I think. I don't remember too much. But yeah, that's how a lot of the Adventist churches in LA would probably differ from any of these really, you know, Orthodox and very, very traditional churches. There's not a lot of visual stuff. There's not a lot of, you know, there's not incense. I don't think we really had candles on like a regular basis. Sometimes they do some interactive type services and stuff, so there might be stuff going on in different rooms where you could go look at it, like see like a palm frond, or like see like certain stuff. I remember this one intense Easter Sabbath where they had different rooms. I think one room you could like write your sins in the sand or something and then wipe it away. Another room, there was like, I don't know if there was a cross or like a board where you could hammer in nails to it, and just the sound of it, it was like really hard wood, so like the sound of it was like impacting. Another thing, every 13th Sabbath with the communion, there would be a foot washing service. So they do like, I think families, men's group or women's group, and they do foot washing. And then they'd sing a song. At a certain point, I didn't like it. I didn't go anymore. It wasn't really my thing. It was just awkward to me. But they'd use these like basins, and you'd put water in it, and you'd take paper towels, you'd wash somebody's feet, you'd change out the water, they'd wash your feet, you'd throw out the water, you know, you'd dry each other's feet off and wash your hands or whatever. And when that was done, the group that was all in that room, the large group, you know, they'd all sing a song, and they'd all go into the service, back into the service, or people could sit and meditate or pray, or just kind of very, you know, quietly talk amongst each other. If they didn't want to go and do foot washing, they just wait for everyone else to finish. Everyone would come back together, and then they do the cracker and the little bit of grape juice. Like they either got like unleavened wafers, or they would make their own unleavened bread. It was like a wheat unleavened bread. I always liked it. It tasted good, but you couldn't just like eat it because they would bless it. And so they'd have like, I remember once having some that was like unconsecrated, and we would like, me and my friends would like eat it. We're like, these haven't been blessed, and we were like snacking on them. But because we always liked the flavor of it, but it's like you would only have it at communion. Like it wasn't something you would buy at the store or whatever. So it's a very specific taste, you know, that I remember. it wasn't wine, it was grape juice, like Welch's or something. A little bit, like one of those little plastic thimble looking things, and they would come around with the tray. I think there was one time where I was allowed to participate, not once, but maybe a few times. I would either pass it out, the bread or the wine, I can't remember it, probably the bread tray. It was like those metal shiny, they look like silver, like shining silver trays where they had the little holders for each of the cups, and then they would have the little bread laid out on like a piece of like parchment paper or cloth or something, and people would each grab one. You go like row by row and people would grab it. So they would let women participate in services, like even when I was young, when I was like probably in college or teens or so, because I got baptized before high school, I think. And so, I was allowed to kind of just volunteer to do stuff. Like I could do congregational prayer, I could do the welcome, I could help pick up the offering, I could help serve the communion. But yeah, we were kind of, a lot of us, like me and a lot of my friends, we were really into like doing service and volunteering for the church and stuff. Because like I mentioned, we were like around every day, almost every day of the week. We were around the pastor almost every day of the week. Like, we all kind of grew up together. So it's like, and he recently had his 40th year of preaching. So he's been preaching about as long as I've been alive. And I met him when I was like 5 years old. So he was like 5 years into preaching, into pastoring when I first met him. And I think that was his first church. And so I'm still in touch with a lot of people that are there. Kept the membership there and everything. I'm not like against it. Like I got my own things that I'm interested in and my own ways that I live my life and my own kind of things. But overall it was pretty decent. Like I was saying, my main issue with it was like the social stuff, the judgment and stuff like that. But I mean, like for myself, I felt looked after and respected, and I was able to participate, and even some stuff, if I wasn't even like good at it, like I was able to like do it. Like, nobody like told me, oh, you're a female, don't be involved, or like you're too young, you can't do that. Like, because I was a baptized member, and I'm not like tooting my own horn, but it was a big part of my culture. I was showing up there all the time. So like, like I don't think people like I really don't know maybe what people thought, but like it was a good time overall. Like I like talking about it, obviously, but like I have had some bitterness about it too within certain times of my life, but not always. I'm not always like bitter about it. It's just sometimes, just depending what I'm thinking about. But if you think of it, I was raised around a lot of this religion for a very long time, multiple days of the week. It wasn't like how I'm not saying there's anything wrong with this, but I'm not a little bit like some people, they go to church on Sunday. They don't hang out with people from their church. Their churches don't have events. They don't have social types of stuff. Like like, we had other religious social stuff too. We'd have, like, I think there was a prayer meeting on Tuesdays or something, and then there would usually be a Vespers at the beach, like, during summers, like, once a month on Friday nights. There'd be a bonfire over at, like, Dockweiler Beach. They'd eat some veggie hot dogs and sing some, it was like campfire songs, but, like, you know, acoustic church songs, and, like, bring in the Sabbath, and then the next day there would be church, and, you know, there was a lot of, like, casual stuff to do too. It wasn't just like come in on this church day, do that, and then everybody goes their separate ways. Like, a lot of us were in sports league together, a lot of us were in school together, a lot of us, you know, even today, like, I was, you know, last week I was out with some friends, and, you know, one person I just met, somebody I had met a few years ago, and I was with a friend, and, you know, the new person was kind of asking us questions, like, oh, how do you guys know each other? How long have you known each other? All that kind of stuff. And we realized we've known each other for 26 years. It's like, I'd never done the math on it. I was just like, yeah, we've probably known each other like 15 years or so, I was thinking. But yeah, 26 years we've known each other. And we didn't even grow up, like, in our younger youth. Like, we met as, like, teens. Like, I knew people before I was even a teenager. I still have some people that I know that are connected through this church system, you know, because my folks are still connected with the church, and the friends of my parents are still connected with the church. So my experience in LA is very interesting because it's very connected. There's a lot of, like, religious ties. Like, a lot of people I talk to are they were raised around or in one of the churches, or I knew them from school, and then their parents are friends with my parents, or were at one time. Not that they had falling outs, but, like, you know, people lose contact and stuff. But, like, eventually they see each other. And, you know, I see the younger people, like, around my age, we kind of all kind of see each other here and there. So I don't really know. Yeah. So yeah, that's kind of what I think of when I was watching those videos. I'm like, okay, like, these churches are way different from the way I grew up. I think my church experience was a lot more casual, but also that helped it to be more, like, it was also, like, sociable. Like, there was a lot of different social avenues that were connected lifestyle-wise. Because Adventists do kind of have, like, a lifestyle kind of difference. Like, I did grow up with friends that didn't go to movies, or didn't eat meat, or didn't listen to secular music and stuff like that. So when you have, it's not everybody, but there were a select few of people who had certain rules where, like, they were pretty strict. So I've gone from hanging out with people that were really conservative like that to people who just do, like, any old thing. And, you know, so navigating all of that, you know, even in my youth, it was like, you have to figure out how to compromise. You know, there was a lot of, like, going out to boba. Some people didn't buy stuff if it was a Friday night. You know, there was a lot of stuff that we would do. Sports were a big thing because most people were allowed to play sports, just not on the Sabbath. And so, yeah, that's kind of what it was like. I don't know how it is now, because generationally things have definitely changed. But yeah, I mean, it was a good time. It was a good, like, I had my problems, of course, but, you know, everybody had their own problems. We're all growing up, and, but yeah, it's pretty different from what these other churches seem like. We weren't so strict on things, like, in the church and all that. It was more like your lifestyle and like social life for the most part. That's what it felt like to me in comparison to what it seems like with the other churches that they show.